Welcome to the latest episode of Lean In Leander. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with a new face to the body politic here in Leander, David McDonald, who's running for place 3 on the ballot in May. And David is a very interesting guy, and I was very much looking forward to sitting down with him and getting to know him a little bit and sharing that conversation with you, the podcast viewer, and of course listeners for those of you who are on audio. David and I had a wide-ranging conversation about some of the things that influence him and his decision-making, and hopefully give you a little bit of insight into what kind of person he is. I found him to be very, very nice and a pleasure to talk to, and I look forward to sharing the episode with you now. So stick around for my conversation with David McDonald. I'm here at Humble Pint with candidate David McDonald. David, thanks for taking some time. I appreciate you coming to Humble Pint.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. We're going to have a little conversation here, learn a little bit about David. He's fairly a new face on the political landscape here in Leander, so let's find out a little bit about him and what makes him tick. So tell me about what brings you to Leander, like when did you move here, where are you from, that type of thing.
Okay, so let me go all the way back then. So I'm a native Texan, was born and raised in Abilene, Texas. After I graduated high school, I went into the Marine Corps and served 4 years there in the Marine Corps and served in Desert Storm.
Oh, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. And when I got out, well, actually prior to getting out, Austin Police Department was the only agency in Texas that would actually allow me to test and get what's called civil service points on your exam prior to actually being out of the military. So I came down here, took the test, did pretty well, and 3 months after I got out of the Marine Corps, I started with the Austin Police Department. So I was back in 1993. Well, in 1994, we had a house in Austin, but just the distance to get everywhere, and actually just the values of what we wanted. Being from Abilene, it's not Austin. Mm-hmm. So Leander kind of fit the bill, and so in 1997, the family moved out here to Leander. And that was in October 1997, and been in Leander Cedar Park ever since 1997.
Okay, so Leander, then Cedar Park then Leander?
Leander, Cedar Park, and then back to Leander.
And now back to Leander.
Yes.
Okay, so how long have you been here this go-round?
Since April of 2018, so almost 4 years.
Oh, okay, about the same as me. You've been a little bit more, obviously if you're in Cedar Park before then right. It's a little bit more time in the area. I came from Houston about 4 years ago.
Okay.
So big city to kind of central Texas, a little different. Mm-hmm. A little different.
It is.
But hey, that's you go where the jobs are, so to speak.
Right.
So are you currently serving as a police officer? Are you still in that line of business, or?
So I retired in December 2017. I got offered another job, and so I was like, okay, I've done 25 years. Let's see what you can do after police work.
Okay.
Because sometimes you don't even know if there's a life after police work.
Right.
Do the skills I have, do they transfer outside of law enforcement?
Right.
And they do.
Okay. So what is it that you do now? Are you free to talk about that, or are you doing something super secret special?
No, I work for the state. I work for the Texas Department of Transportation.
Okay.
And I work in the transportation field.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
So you have on the regular exposure to, I guess, the logistics of the state. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, it would. All the what we call ITS that you see on the roadways with the big message board signs, mm-hmm. and also the cameras. I got a full insight to all that, and also the crashes and other incidents that happen around the state that take a long time to get off the roadway and cause a lot of congestion, and so yeah.
So is it a specialty that you have there, or is it more like I'm curious what kind of job it is?
I guess you could call it a specialty because I'm the only one for the department.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So yes, I'm what we call the subject matter expert in traffic incident management.
Oh, okay. All right. So your focus is primarily on helping mitigate after
Correct.
Accidents? Okay.
And actually preventing secondary
Right.
crashes, because
Right.
if you can mitigate the first one quickly, then the likelihood of a secondary actually diminishes. So
That's interesting. So I'm curious, because do you do studies that would be kind of like, development studies or anything along those lines where you're looking at maybe a community like Leander that's growing and it's creating traffic issues? Is that along the lines, or?
So design can definitely play into those factors because we can create our own issues with poor design. We're not finding that so much of a factor. It's really just having all responders. And so one of the things I do is teach. So I actually still travel around the state and still teach traffic incident management. So all firefighters are required to have this training. And since April 1st, 2020, it's now taught in all police academies. So I still train a lot of police instructors so they can instruct this material. And it's really just having an understanding of applying all the things that Texas law gives us to actually move these things. So we can actually reduce those secondary crashes and reduce congestion. Put yourself driving down the interstate and you drive up on a backup and you can't even see any lights. What do you start see people doing? They're exiting through the medians, right. And so the behavior gets really dangerous.
Right.
So if we can change what we're doing, so we can't control the drivers, but we can control what we do. And if we can clear those crashes and get them off the roadway and even turn off our lights and work in a parking lot somewhere, it just makes it better for everyone. The responders don't have to worry about getting struck. The people you're working with don't have to worry about getting struck. And the people driving the roadways don't do those other activities that are really dangerous.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'd never really thought about that as being a teachable skill per se, but now that you're speaking about it, I'm like, that makes a lot of sense. That does make a lot of sense.
When I went through the academy in 1993, we were taught, hey, this is your roadway, you shut it down as long as you need it. So we're trying to change that mindset. Very interesting.
That's very, very interesting. I know that, I've had that frustration, once or twice in my life. I tend to have an attitude of like, well, A, I'm not a doctor. B, I probably don't know who they are. So it's like, let's move on and let's try to get through this. And if everybody had that mentality, we would probably be able to move past it. But if my wife's in the car, right. It's a completely different scenario, and she gets very frustrated by those types of things, which I imagine most people do.
They do, and there's an old saying, you cannot build your way out of congestion. And, let's face it, I heard somebody talk last week, 1,000 people a day are still moving to Texas.
Yeah.
So we're not getting less cars on the roadway, we're getting more.
Right.
So we have to change if we're going to make things better.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because because of the fact that you're running for a city council position, it's always, I think, really important to understand what it is that you do. Because again, that helps kind of at least give a little bit of an indication of what kind of skill set you have, just in general, not specifically. But it also helps highlight the fact that why are you running? Because this is kind of a volunteer type position. There's really no real compensation per se. What motivates you to jump in and, get your hands dirty, so to speak?
So, again, I lived in Cedar Park for years, so it's going to be kind of twofold. Living there for years and being in this area is, almost 25 years now. Seeing Cedar Park flourish, and then not seeing Leander flourish as quickly or as much. That's one of the things that really got me engaged. But, when the pandemic hit, and I started seeing a lot of things going on around our nation, and then, the George Floyd things, the civil unrest, those things happened. And the profession that I honorably served in for 25 years was under attack, and my brothers and sisters down at Austin PD were working those events and, going home with feces on their uniforms and, paint and other things and being injured, right? I just knew I had to do something. But I wasn't going to go back into law enforcement. But, as things happen, I feel like we just got three options. We can either move, we can complain, which does nothing, or you can get involved. And so I decided to get involved. And I think more people should get involved. Like when I went and knocked on your door in your neighborhood, I loved your sign, vote in Leander. I don't think everybody understands that your local and county elections have more impact on your daily life than the state and national elections. And so I really appreciated seeing your sign, and because I want people to get involved. Take involvement in your community and have a better understanding of what's going on. And, I think of going to a nice place for dinner. And there's a couple places you can go in Leander, but if they're too crowded, then you have to go outside of Leander. And so I'd like to just see more opportunities for that and for people to be able to stay here and spend their money. As someone once said, Leander's not just hemorrhaging their sales tax money via the train. Their money's leaving the city because people go otherwhere to eat and do other activities. So
it's very, very true.
It's twofold. So.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that you would come at that. Everyone has, in my experience, everyone has, their biases and their motivations and whatnot. And, I'm always very fond of having a conversation, and at least from the conversation, we may not agree on everything, and that's okay. But I think it's really important to be able to sit down and have that conversation and that mutual respect, and just engage in some of those topics. You and I would come from not completely different sides of what you described with George Floyd and the policing and things of that nature, but I have a little bit of a different opinion. I mean, I do, but I don't completely disagree with what you say either. I mean, I can see both sides, which is what I try to do in pretty much every situation. I'm like, okay, I have to remove my personal bias and my personal echo chamber per se, and I have to see, okay, well, what's going on both sides of this equation, because that's the only way you can actually find a solution, in my opinion. So it's really interesting in talking about Leander and what's going on in our city, because a lot of the conversation revolves around, how can we better prepare ourselves, or how can we better address these things. But there's always a challenge there, in that there is a portion of the population that wants to move in a more small town kind of vibe, feel, conversation. They was, I want to keep the town with that small community, and and then I can appreciate that, because it's one of the things that appeals to me, to be quite honest. But the reality is we're 87,000 already. It's like we're not a small town anymore. So you have to try to balance those two things.
Right.
And I think it's really important. And I appreciate the fact that you talk a little bit about the vote, because I think that's really important. And I'm not here, when I do these interviews, I'm not trying to steer anybody one particular way or the other. I'm just like, hey, here are the candidates. I talked to them. Here's what they had to say in our conversation. You obviously will have an opportunity to have your own forums and your own, community meetings and things of that nature, where you can speak directly to the electorate. But I wish there were more people who are in that electorate, because when I look at those numbers, I'm like, wow, this isn't even, it's 5-8% if we're lucky. And this is an off-year election, so it's going to be a smaller percentage of people who are making decisions to the point that affect, 80, 100,000 people in the long run. Mm-hmm. And so I encourage people, again, register. If you haven't registered, register to vote. If you'd like to vote early, that starts middle of April. 25th. April 25th.
And the deadline to vote for this election is April 6th.
To register to vote.
To register to vote.
Register to vote. Yeah, to register to vote. So, and you can find all that information on voteinleander.com. So if you want to go there, that's all listed for you. But I do appreciate that. I think, and the fact that you were out walking the blocks as early as you were, because that was really kind of early. I hadn't seen that. I hadn't seen anybody do that quite yet for this time around. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. But the motivators are the same, is really kind of what I'm getting to at the end of the day. The point is, the motivators are the same. We both want to see the best for our community for the long term. So with that, what would you say, outside of the motivation to actually run, what would you say are some of the areas where you think you would be able to add to the conversation and maybe move in a particular direction?
So, first and foremost, when we had, I don't know what you guys called it, but, I've heard it called Snowmageddon.
The Snowpocalypse.
Snowpocalypse back in 2021. And then we look at the wildfires that are happening right now, the tornadoes that happen over there in Round Rock and up in Jarrell. And
felt like one last night, right? Here. I mean, that was crazy.
So, emergency operations is one of those things that I work both at Austin PD and now with the state. So that's some knowledge that I can bring to the city. But also transportation issues, just understanding design and the flow of traffic and the new technologies that are available to put in our red lights, so we can actually keep traffic moving rather than stopping, from one red light to the next. And then when the train comes by, having a different type of signal operation to where we get a steady green north and south when the train's coming by, at least you can keep traffic moving. And, so small things like that, I call them small things. Maybe other people don't see them as small, but because of my background, I think those are pretty easily to correct. But when I moved out here in 1997, people talked about the water back then.
Yeah.
We're still talking about water.
Yeah. And I do think, in fairness to what has happened since some of those issues became so pronounced, it's my opinion, this is just my opinion, that I think that issue of water and the infrastructure and stuff like that, I think it's a very complex, a very big issue from that perspective, with multiple complexities of which you can enumerate. Do we have the proper infrastructure? Do we have the proper funding to be able to build the proper infrastructure? I think there were some decisions made in the past that really exasperated that situation for us during that period of time. And I'd like to think that some of the decisions that have been made and some of the directional movement are starting to work to resolve those issues. We're not going to see that for 5 years, maybe a little bit more. And is there more to be done? I think so.
Yes.
I think so.
As you mentioned, when I moved out here in 97, we were 16,000. We're over 85, 87,000
yeah, it's like
now.
87 now.
And the projections are to be over 100,000 within the next 5 years. So more has to be done.
Yeah.
We have to prepare.
And it's exponential. The growth will continue. There's nothing that you can do to necessarily, you can't slow that down. Outside of, even during the pandemic, the numbers were still remarkable when you really, really think about that there were still that many people moving in a period of time where kind of everything was shut down. And I see it in my neighborhood. I live in a newer subdivision, and there's 30 new houses out there, and there's a whole new subdivision. They're going to put in 250 more, and they're sold out. They don't have enough inventory to build for this.
But you mentioned earlier that there's people that want to keep Leander small. Well, you just mentioned 250 houses going in, and that's just over in the area. There's more of those developments. Look over at 183 now.
Yeah.
That new development going in. So, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to stay small. But what I'd like to see is other ways to collect revenues, right? Because if we don't, then everything's going to fall on the backs of the homeowners for their property taxes to fund everything in our city. So that's why I think it's so critical that we get some type of smart economic development here and bring in corporations. I'm not talking about, your mom and pop shops. Those are great. But the bigger ones are going to have the most impact to help us with our infrastructure needs, with those tax bases and just the other elements that they bring with employees and people living here and restaurants building here, because there's people to go to those during lunchtime, right? Because now we have jobs here. And so, it all works together, and it's not going to happen overnight. If I do get elected, it's not going to happen in the next 3 years, but we have to start paving the way for those things to happen.
Do you have any familiarity, again, since you're coming into this relatively new? I don't want to presume how much you've done to prepare yourself. How familiar are you with, say, the comprehensive plan, for instance? Have you had an opportunity to review that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
I've not reviewed it, and I'm not familiar with it. So.
Okay. So a lot of what we talk about in the comprehensive plan is the economic drivers. And for instance, we're sitting here at Humble Pine, and here on Hero, this is a commercial corridor. At least in the comprehensive plan it is. So there's always a challenge of you need to have that commercial diversification. You need to have that Class C and Class C space, and Class A space and office buildings and things of that nature. So you've got the competition between the residential and the business needs. And one cannot exist without the other.
Right.
Because you can't, to your point, I absolutely agree. I think that we need to diversify the tax base. And we've had some successes, bringing in some companies. I've done a couple of interviews with a couple of, business drivers here in Leander. One being the Gold Reserve, for instance, which I think they employ 250 people, something along those lines. And there's the new, I can't remember the name of the company, but it's a knife manufacturer. And they're bringing in a similar number of jobs. But then those people have to have somewhere to live. So it's kind of it's this, you have to try to balance that. And that's difficult. That's very difficult. So outside of the economics, what are some other things that you feel engaged in, like the things that you would like to see? I don't know. I don't want to say changed because that's not fair. I mean, I don't want to put you in that position, but just things that you would be interested to see happen in our city.
I'd like to see us be a little bit more competitive in our pay for both our firefighters and our law enforcement community. And speaking with those folks, and I've been meeting with them, and actually got the endorsement from the Leander Law Enforcement Association, which I was very honored to get. But, just making sure that we're taking care of those who take care of us, and risk it every day, and night, and weekends, and holidays, and
right,
24/7
special events,
and making sure that we can, because we have good people here, but I'd like to make sure that we can retain them. That there's not something more attractive, the next city over, because they pay $20,000 more a year. Right.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's really, you're the only one who's mentioned it so far. I mean, that's a conversation point that I think obviously you would have a tremendous amount of insight towards. I think we have a lot of people that you talk to, and I've been involved with a couple of surveys here in Leander. Police and fire are always at the top of the survey. Like they're the safety of the city, and they're well regarded and well respected within the square mileage here in Leander. But I think it's a fair point. Do we want to be able to retain those quality people? I think the police chief does a really, really good job in the way that he approaches the hiring of new staff. I know that he has an eye towards, diversifying his police force, ensuring that, it can relate to the community, which I thought was really, really interesting. I had a conversation with him about 2 years ago now, I think, because we were looking at diversity, and I was saying, well, who's doing what now? And his name came up in the conversation, so I did reach out to him. He was very kind, gave me about an hour of his time, and we talked about that. And it was really, really interesting to hear from that perspective what he was doing and ensuring that was at least addressed. And there's nothing you can do to resolve that, I think, at the end of the day. I mean, that's all about, community policing and being involved with the community and whatnot, which to me is part of that solution, that there's, and I don't think it's as pronounced here in Leander. I would think that maybe that's a little bit more pronounced in a city like Austin, where there's a little bit more of, I don't know, I don't know quite how to put that, but I would say that the difference in opinion there is a little bit more pronounced. As an APD officer, I don't know if you experienced that yourself, or maybe you were in a certain area of town where the police aren't as respected as they would be in other areas.
Well, that does happen.
Yeah, it does.
There are certain areas where they just don't really care for your presence, because a lot of times we're not solving their problems. A lot of times you're just putting a Band-Aid on the problem, and they know as soon as you leave, it's so they do like us, but they're frustrated. And then you have the criminal element who wants to be able to do their criminal activity, and so yes, they're not going to like you. And unfortunately, I'm only one person, and I know law enforcement, it's an honorable profession, but we've had those that have put a black eye on it, if you will. And I want to make sure everybody understands this. A good cop hates a bad cop more than anyone else, more than the citizens do, because it makes our profession look so bad. And I also want to reiterate, what happened to George Floyd was criminal activity. I do not condone what happened, so I don't know if I made that clear when I covered that earlier. And so there are those certain elements and pockets that you're just not well respected, because sometimes they've had a negative encounter. Cops are humans, and they can have a bad day. They could have talked to someone else.
Absolutely.
And use words that maybe they should not have used. And so that one encounter kind of, stains it and paints a bad picture for them. And then, they see all these other criminal activities happening, and they get stopped for speeding and get a ticket. And it's like, that's their one encounter, and so it's a negative encounter. And that's why it's so tough, because you're trying to do a job, you're trying to keep the community safe, but most of the time your interaction is going to be negative because something bad has happened.
Right. Would you say that, is it fair to say that maybe you have a different perspective on, say, patience, just because of your experience? I mean, I'm certain I've had situations, I try to stay very even keel, but I've had situations where something just kind of gets me, so I get a little angry. I imagine that your experience in law enforcement helps you with that. Is that fair?
That's fair to say, yes. Because I've been called everything under the sun. Heck, I remember going to a restaurant one night just because we needed to eat, right? And a lady walked out of the restaurant, and she walked right by me and my partner and says, "I don't eat with pigs."
Oh, wow. Seriously?
Well, the plus side was they were very crowded, and since she left, we got our table. So, but, so you're called names, you're cussed out. I worked the protest back in 2000 when we had the Fortune 500, or it wasn't Fortune 500, but anyways, there was a large event back then. Worked the riots of February 2001 at Mardi Gras downtown, and after this is before George Floyd. This is back in actually I worked a protest the night after, the very next night after the 4 Dallas police officers were killed.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
And so you have to have thick skin. You also have to understand they don't even know me, so they're not mad at me. They're mad at the profession, and you have to let them vent. So yes, it does give you patience, and that's why I feel like I'm also very well qualified for this position, because I know how to listen to people without getting riled up, and being able to talk to them and try to calm the situation, but being a good listener and coming up with a reasonable solution that people can actually live with. And so I look forward to being able to bring all of my experiences and serve Leander.
No, I think that's very insightful, and those are the kinds of things that I try to get to when I have these conversations, because the way that you go about problem solving is just as important as solving the problem itself. Right. You have to have, let's say, obviously the life experience and the skill sets that you bring to that, they're going to apply, but just the being able to take that and understand it. I mean, obviously someone, there's people mature at different rates and whatnot. I mean, it just all depends on the individual, but when you have the type of life experience that I'm certain that you've had, okay? I have friends who are in law enforcement, and so I do have some understanding of it. I can't pretend that I'm an expert, because I'm not. And even I stayed at a Holiday Inn last night, still not an expert, okay? So I get it, and I definitely do have, I don't want to say empathy, but I think I do have some understanding. I get that that's a hard job, and that it's not for everybody. There's some people who do it better than others. I mean, I think at the end of the day, that's a little fair. But I like the fact that you're talking about that. I think that's very interesting, and I think it's insightful to who you are as an individual, and how you can go about, applying that to some of the issues that exist here in the city. Is there anything else that draws your attention specifically? I saw this and I have an opinion here, and I think that maybe I can help with this particular scenario.
I mean, specifically for Leander, no, but yes, because I see a lot of keyboard warriors out there, people attacking people when they've never even had a conversation with them, like what we're doing right now. And when I look at what's happening in our country and these keyboard warriors and social media and everything else, I mean, whatever happened to just being a good person, treating others with respect?
Yeah.
And if we could get back to that, I think we can actually, start coming back together. And again, just like you mentioned earlier, we're not going to agree on everything, but we can at least have a respect for one another and be nice to each other.
Absolutely.
And be good people.
Yeah. No,
there's no cost to that.
Couldn't agree with you more. And part of what I try to do with the podcast and with these interviews in this particular series is let that part of your personality be seen by people. Because let's be honest, when you're sitting in a forum or you're in a Q&A, it's very issue oriented, just, well, what about this? And how do you feel about that? And et cetera, so forth and so on. So I try to steer away from that, honestly. Some people find that not to be the greatest way to do these, but it's my platform, so I'll do it the way I want to do it.
So George Floyd just did not affect people. I mean, it affected law enforcement. It affected me personally. So my wife and I, we have a blended family. 3 of those kids are from my first marriage, and then she has one, and then we have one together. But when my oldest son was a sophomore in high school, we took in a youth, and happened to be black, and his family kicked him out. But we took him in for well over a year before his mother called him back to Mississippi. And anyways, he still participates with our family today, family events, family vacations, came to our daughter's wedding because he's part of our family. And
I think I'm assuming this gave you some...
When the George Floyd thing happened, pardon me.
It's okay. It's my first Oprah moment.
I was so disappointed that my 4 years of Marine Corps service, 25 years in law enforcement, that our country had got to that point.
Yeah.
And that he had to be worried about where he went.
Mm-hmm.
And not just by law enforcement, but just by people filled with so much hate. And, he had his vehicle vandalized with, a slang term for his race. And, so the things that he's had to endure through this. And so it really does pull my heart. Because that's not why we serve. We want this country to be better. And so that's another reason, I'd love to get elected just so can help bridge that gap, because we're so divided. And I'm not saying here in Leander, but the country. And so, maybe let's make this an example of how you can make things better. And everybody, can get along and treat people with respect and still disagree.
No, and again, that seems to be the theme of our conversation, but I agree that we can disagree. I think that's part of the whole point.
My wife and I disagree.
Exactly. And to the point, I think, again, you make light of it a little bit there, but it's true. Yeah. Our personal relationships are not such that we agree on every little thing, but we learn how to work together, find the compromise, and in certain instances, maybe you have to make a hard decision, okay? That just continues outward from there. Even in your own personal life, you make decisions that sometimes are the harder decision, and it's not the easier way to go, but you feel that, hey, this is what we should do. And I think the same thing applies to community as a whole. I agree with you. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity here in Leander for people to get on the same page and pull the same direction, okay? Because we're all going to have to live in the city at the end of the day. And if that's not what you want to do, well then, there's some people who say, well, move. Well, no, that's not a solution. Find a way to be able to find that decorum and sense of community. It's a sense of community. It's a pride in what you do and where you live and the people you surround yourself with. And we don't necessarily need to surround ourselves with the exact same people all the time.
I agree.
We don't.
I'm pretty plain.
Yeah, and that's okay too. I was like, hey, I have buddies who invite me to go shoot pool and not my scene. Still my buddy. Dude, I don't want to do that. I don't enjoy that, So I think you can apply the same thing to a lot of circumstances. I think it's important that people get involved. I definitely encourage people to learn, what's going on in your city, how can you make a difference, even if it's just on the margins, because even that one little difference that you make, maybe you just go clean up your own park in your own neighborhood. That makes a difference to everybody else who uses that park. Right. So those are the types of things that I personally like to try to get involved with and, approach things in a kind of a servant leadership. And anyone who takes the time to throw their hat in the ring, I have a tremendous amount of respect for, because again, it's a volunteer position. Okay,
yes, it is.
Not making any money. It's also a long-term commitment. You're saying, hey, not only am I making myself available, I'm making myself available for at the minimum the next 3 years. And again, like you said, it's one thing to sit on the sidelines and complain or opine. It's another thing to get involved.
Right.
And so I appreciate you taking that step. This has been a tremendously insightful conversation and very pleasant. And I really, really do appreciate that. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks how they can find out a little bit more about you.
So I'm not a huge social media person and not even a website person, as Andrew kind of alluded to earlier. I'm a go out and meet you type person. knocking on your door. But if you do want to get more information, I do have a website. It's davidforleander.com, and that's FOR. Also, David for Leander on Facebook. Not a lot of information there, like I said, because I like to be out in the neighborhoods. I guess it reminds me of being a cop, because when you go knock on that door, you don't know who's going to answer. You don't know what the conversation is going to be like. And I will say this, it's always been pleasant. The people in Leander are great. And so that's why I'd like to really get to meet you. But those are some ways you can go and be proactive in knowing about me. So.
Well, fantastic. David, like I said, this has been a really a pleasure for me. And I thank you very, very much for taking the time and sitting down with me. And as I've said to each of the candidates, I wish you the very, very best of luck in your efforts, and encourage you to stay involved.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
He had to be worried about where he went, and not just by law enforcement, but just by people feeling so much hate. And he had his vehicle vandalized with, a slang term for his race, and so the things that he's had to endure through this. So it really does pull apart. Yeah, that's not why we serve. We want this country to be better, and so that's another reason, love to get elected, just so it can help bridge that gap, because we're so divided. I'm not saying here in Leander, but the country, and so let's make this an example of how you can make things better. Everybody, can get along and treat people with respect, and still do some work.
No, and again, that seems to be the theme of our conversation, but I agree that we can disagree. I think that's part of the whole point.
My wife and I disagree.
Exactly. I mean, and to the point, I think, again, you make light of it a little bit there, but it's true. Yeah. Our personal relationships are not such that we agree on every little thing, but we learn how to work together, find the compromise, and in certain instances, maybe you have to make a hard decision, okay? That just continues outward from there. I mean, even in your own personal life, you make decisions that sometimes are the harder decision, and it's the easier way to go, but you feel that, hey, this is what we should do. And I think the same thing applies to community as a whole. I agree with you. I think that there's a tremendous opportunity here in Leander for people to get on the same page and pull the same direction, okay? Because we're all going to have to live in the city at the end of the day. And if that's not what you want to do, well then, some people say, well, move. Well, no, that's not a solution. Find a way to be able to find that decorum and sense of community. It's a sense of community. It's a pride in what you do and who you, where you live, and the people you surround yourself with. And we don't necessarily need to surround ourselves with the exact same people all the time.
I agree.
We don't. I mean,
pretty plain.
Yeah, and that's okay too. That's okay. I have buddies who invite me to go shoot pool, and not my scene. Still my buddy. Just like, dude, I don't want to do that. That's not enjoy it. So I think you can apply the same thing to a lot of circumstances. I think it's important that people get involved. I definitely encourage people to learn, what's going on in your city. How can you make a difference? Even if it's just on the margins, because even that one little difference that you make, maybe just go clean up your own park in your own neighborhood. That makes a difference to everybody else who uses that park. So those are the types of things that I personally like to try to get involved with. Approach things in a kind of a servant leadership. And anyone who takes the time to throw their hat in the ring, I have a tremendous amount of respect for, because again, it's a volunteer position. Okay, not making any money. it's also a long-term commitment. I mean, you're saying, hey, not only am I making myself available, I'm making myself available for at the minimum the next 3 years. And again, like you said, it's one thing to sit on the sidelines and complain or opine. It's another thing to get involved. And so I appreciate you taking that step. This has been a tremendously insightful conversation and very pleasant. And I really, really do appreciate that. And I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks how they can find out a little bit more about you.
So I'm not a huge social media person and not even a website person, as Andrew kind of alluded to earlier. I'm a go out and meet you type person, knocking on your door. But if you do want to get more information, I do have a website. It's davidforlander.com, and that's FOR. Also, David Forlander on Facebook. Not a lot of information there, like I said, because I like to be out in the neighborhoods. I guess it reminds me of being a cop, because when you go knock on that door, you don't know who's going to answer. You don't know what the conversation is going to be like. And I will say this, it's always been pleasant. People in Orlando are great. So that's where I'd like to really get to meet you, but those are some ways you can go and be proactive and
Well, fantastic. David, like I said, this has been a really a pleasure for me, and I thank you very, very much for taking the time and sitting down with me. And as I've said to each of the candidates, I wish you the very, very best of luck in your efforts, and encourage you to stay involved.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it.